Okay, as you can see from your agenda, we're supposed to have a presentation from the Honorable Minister of Humanitarian Affairs. He confirmed that he'll be here. He's not here. At next year, we start everything on time and end on time, and we don't believe in African time, so we're going to skip him and move. Same for the coordinating minister of the economy. He confirmed and deputized his Minister of State, who also confirmed last night, but we're not going to be waiting for anyone. So on that note, I'm going to move on to the panel discussion. And what we want to do with this panel discussion is to address or to figure out how we've been addressing poverty in Nigeria. What are some of the things we've learned, and what are some of the things we need to be doing differently? And to join me on this panel is my brother and friend, Professor Chidi Onya, who's the Secretary to the State Government of Enugu State, representing His Excellency, Dr. Peter Mbah. I'd like to invite Mr. Shamsuddin Lawal, who is the Technical Advisor to the Statistician General, National Bureau of Statistics, representing the Statistician General. Also joining me on the panel is Jacob Dixon. He's a Senior Research and Policy Officer with Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative. He was gracious enough to join us from London. And I will be moderating. Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. So I'd like to start with Jacob, just basically to share a bit of a context to the conversation we're going to have. Jacob, OPHI's multi-dimensional poverty index shows that Nigeria has one of the highest MPI scores globally. But beyond the headline statistics, what specific dimensions of poverty are most prevalent in Nigeria, and how do these compare to patterns you've seen in your work, globally or even in sub-Saharan Africa?
Thank you, Patrick. First of all, good morning, everyone, and thank you to Patrick and the team for putting together this fantastic event. Let me just start with background about what me and my colleagues are doing. I'm guessing most, if not all of you, will know the Nigerian Multidimensional Poverty Index and this statistics of these 133 million that were in the news all over the country. We do feel very privileged to have been able to support NBS and many other colleagues in putting together this Multidimensional Poverty Index, and we do the same work for many other governments around the world. More than 15 here in sub-Saharan Africa, and then over 50 countries all around the world now have their own multidimensional poverty indices. As Patrick mentioned, as we saw earlier in the little clip that we all saw, these statistics that are put out by these reports and by the work we do, they're never really very happy statistics. They're poverty statistics. They're always sad. They're always shocking. And as we heard, many of the deprivation rates are particularly high throughout Nigeria. We have more than 50% of the population not having clean cooking fuels. We have 4 out of 10 people not having access to improved sanitation, food insecurity being really high. The deprivations are very similarly high in other countries, also in Africa, especially when for the first time we do these assessments. So I think one of the success stories that I'd just like to share is one that really is cross-cutting, that is keeping these statistics not just in mind as something that's sad and shocking, but something that also gives us a tool, an evidence base to build actions off. We can learn from these. We know which deprivations are more prevalent in which particular regions of Nigeria. We know that different regions, different states, even different districts and local government areas have different profiles, have different priorities. And so these tools really help us unpack this, and using that in order then to deliver localized and tailored solutions. And in other countries in sub-Saharan Africa, what we've seen is when they have recollected this evidence, we can directly track where things have worked and where they haven't worked, and we can scale up solutions. I think that's one of the key to-dos for Nigeria also. The last evidence we have is from 2020, 2021. So all these numbers that we're looking at are almost 5 years old now. And really something that needs to happen, I think, is to invest in this evidence base and the data infrastructure to make sure that we can actually track what works and what doesn't, as one of the most important things that then tells us how we can build forward better.
Excellent. And I think that's even a good segue to Shamsu, because he spoke about data, the frequency of data, the quality of data, etc. My question is, the quality of poverty data fundamentally shapes how we think about poverty policies and programs, etc. What are some of the current limitations in how Nigeria measures and tracks poverty data? And how is MBS working to provide more actionable intelligence, for policymakers at both the states, federal level, who are really charged with solving Nigeria's poverty challenge?
Okay, thank you very much. The quality of data, we, as National Statistics Office, will keep on improving day by day. We are not yet there, but if you compare our data with, let's say, 20 years ago, and the data we are releasing now, we are improving in terms of the quality. Then I think you asked a question around challenges we face concerning the data. So one of the challenges we are facing is the periodicity of the data and sufficiency of data. Because, for instance, for the monetary poverty, that is the Living Standards Survey, we're supposed to be releasing it after every 5 years. But once we don't have money to carry out that survey because they are capital intensive, we don't have money, so that's why you will not see the result every 5 years. Some of the release can be up to 10 years, while the MPI, that is the Multidimensional Poverty Index, we released now, I think you mentioned it during your speech, we released it 2022, and that's what we are using. We are currently planning on carrying out another survey that will be a follow-up to that particular survey so that we'll know the number of Nigerians that are multidimensionally poor. Are they still 133 million or they are below that? Then another challenge is to produce data at a very granular level, that is at local government level, at some point at what level? Because the data will be more useful to users if the estimates are at a very granular level, let's say at local government. For instance now, if you said the poverty rate in Sokoto is, let's say 80%, the poverty rate, so what's the poverty rate of Sokoto South local government? What's the poverty rate of another local government in Sokoto, maybe Goronyo or somewhere? So we are coming up with another innovation known as small area estimation, whereby even though the survey is conducted at national level, we can report the data at a very granular level, that is local government and what level at some point. Then we need to know we have other offices in the state known as State Bureau of Statistics that are carrying out statistical activities with the support from MBS, so that even if they want to do household survey to produce poverty estimate, we support them, so that when they are reporting their statistics, they can report at local government or what level for effective policy formulation. So another challenges they are facing in carrying out the survey in the state is capacity of the subnational. We are trying hard to make sure we improve the capacity of the state statistical agencies so that they can carry out household surveys that involve measuring poverty, both monetary and multidimensional. And another major challenge is the informal nature of the country. Even though we are carrying out household survey, poor record keeping of household, even if we are asking them the question that has to do with survey, so the informal nature of the country or the economy is still a challenge as far as collating the data is concerned.
I'll come back to push a bit further because the challenges you've mentioned now, I don't see them going away anytime soon. Funding is a major issue, but the advances in technology that we can leverage and have some proxies for estimating poverty incidents in different locations, use of cell phone recharge, and so many of those things. How are we integrating AI into what we're doing? So I'll come back to that, but I want to get to Enugu State because we hear a lot of good things coming out of the state. Beyond infrastructure development, because I know your governor is doing quite a bit on infrastructure. In fact, I think yesterday he announced this whole green schools, smart schools, etc. But beyond infrastructure development, what specific poverty policies and programs are you implementing at the state level to address, the incidence of poverty in the states?
Yeah. Good morning, Patrick. Good morning, everyone. At the inception of this government under Dr. Peter Ndubisumba, we set out some very bold targets. One of it was to reduce our poverty head index to 0%. Mm-hmm. We also set out that
speak more into the mic.
We also set out to increase our GDP from $4.4 billion to $30 billion over 8 years. We also agreed that we wanted to push across our economic base to be one of the top 3 investment locations in Nigeria. We understand clearly that what we are set out to do is not a tenured intervention. Mm-hmm. It's something that was going to outlive the 2 cycles of the governor. Mm-hmm. And in doing that, what we did was that we now said we're going to look at how we're going to push for economic development, move away from palliatives to a more production-focused economy, where we could allow more people to come into the economic ecosystem to improve on their quality of life. Mm-hmm. We also understood very early that education, training, skills acquisition was something that was critical for us to grow our economy and also ensure that we strengthen the economic outlook of our people. So we had now started on the Smart Green School Initiative, which you talked about, which is a very audacious project that now changed the curriculum of what learning ought to be, and even the pedagogical approach to now integrate more concepts and quality of courses that will actually be used in the job environment at a very early stage. We'd also decided that our technical and vocational education was not going to be mundane. It wasn't going to be didactic. We were now going to bring industry into the learning process by bringing the innocence, the renewable energy companies. What we were trying to do was to set a solid foundation, so it is not a knee-jerk approach where we keep on throwing money at a systematic problem or systemic problem. So in Enugu State, we're changing the model by addressing and targeting those things that have long lead time in terms of addressing this. Also, we understand that power is a critical concept of even developing small-scale entrepreneurs, developing businesses. We now, once the Electricity Act was altered and approved by Mr. President, we went quickly into the process of setting up a regulator, right type of independent regulator that will now attract investment capacity into the electricity sector. Also helping with our energy mix, because what we decided to do was to broaden it, where we are looking at a climate action plan that can also trigger some employment in areas that normally you will not find within our zone and our sector. So we've been pushing all these key things, and the key concept was irreversibility. What we're trying to do is building the policies, building the laws at the House of Assembly to ensure that these things do not get reversed. where policy somersaults become the issue. So we streamlined it, built in milestones, and we're targeting what we need to intervene. We also built in interventions around our data system. The data we inherited was not credible. Our social safety nets assumptions were not credible. So we started interrogating that, working with the NBS. I'm glad that he's here, and other people, the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office, the World Bank, to actually develop the methodology and interrogate what we're doing. Without that, our interventions were not going to be evidence-based, and that was something we wanted. We also started in the agriculture space by creating agriculture estates, so we called it farm estates. What this was going to do was allow women, and this was part of our gender intervention, allow women that would normally not have access to lands to come into clusters at every ward level. So we had 100 hectares of land, state cleared, state now. Also, we provide subsidized seedlings and inputs, and also now ensure that the value chain process of post-harvest issues are addressed. And these are the things that normally will affect households. So a couple of things were all going from a multi-pronged intervention approach.
So, I mean, I like what I'm hearing because it appears to me that you're taking a multi-sectoral approach to addressing poverty. But one of the challenges that literature has, always spoken about is this misalignment in federal systems, in federations, where there could be a disconnect between what the state is trying to do and what the federal is trying to do. And just the challenge of coordinating both federal, state agencies, even development partner intervention. What has your experience been, and how have you navigated this within the state?
So the research around this, the lit review around it is correct.
Yeah.
Those were some of the first things that we encountered. And in my role, I thought, and also from my background, it was very clear that donor agencies or multilateral support will usually focus on interventions that were first rigorous during the pilot, but the scaling up was always an issue. We also quickly found that the fragmentation in terms of the way they approached this issue, so there were duplications. Each of them had good intentions to intervene, but different people were doing the same thing with the same population. And if the data that they were interrogating was not accurate, it was going to be a challenge. So what we did was set up a coordinating team where all donor entities that we inherited when we came in, they were all going to present what the intervention outlooks were. We saw, and they also saw where there were duplications. And what that meant was, well, their log frames were already running. They could not quickly change directions. But what we agreed with them was going forward, they were going to restructure and their outlook. And we were also going to build in a strategy that streamlines what intervention was going to be in specific areas. So those were things that we addressed.
Let me put Jacob in. And in your work with MPI data, how can we use such MPI data to help even this coordinating the different agencies to ensure that the interventions are all moving in the same direction, to address poverty at its root cause?
Yeah, so if we remember what multidimensional poverty indices and Nigeria's multidimensional poverty index do, is they look at across 15 indicators, right? And these 4 dimensions that we have, education, health, work and shocks, and living standards, what deprivations are people affected by at the same time? And so you have these 15 indicators, and the beautiful thing is that you will always find the ministry or the agency usually that's responsible to move that indicator and to reduce those deprivations. So we've seen really beautiful examples from other countries where what they've done is, the president or the vice president or convening minister brings everyone around the table. There's an MPI cabinet meeting if you want so, and they look at what's the recent evidence saying, where are the indicators, who's responsible for these things. You go to the governors forum here in Nigeria or equivalent things in other countries, you talk to the governors, you do the same thing again at state level, and you bring that all the way down to districts, local government areas, and can see where there are synergies, where agencies can work together. But it's really this convening people behind this tool and making sure that everyone sees how this also captures something that they're responsible for, brings them at one table, and can then help to develop solutions together, also much more efficiently, because if you have these different sectors there, they can link their actions. They don't have to separately visit the same households. They can see where there's programs where they might use their budgets much more saliently if they put them together. And so we've seen beautiful examples from countries like Colombia, for example, where the president himself, each time there was a new MPI report, brought the entire cabinet around one table, and they did this every time and then checked what worked, what didn't work, where did they have to adjust. So I think something like this, you know, I'm not saying copy exactly what they did, but something like this I think would be a fantastic idea to also try in Nigeria with the MPI results.
Oh, fantastic. But from your discussions with Nigerian leaders, are you seeing that there's interest in moving in this type of direction?
100%. So we've talked to the Governors Forum, we've talked to many governors. NBS, I know, is doing a lot of work also with the state statisticians to make sure that they know how to interpret the results. They might even be doing their own surveys at state and LGA level. So there's been lots of buy-in. We've had many conversations with various ministries. So I think it's really about institutionalizing this all a bit more. You know, the first interactions have been had. There's a lot of willingness and interest, I think, but it's I think a bit about thinking who convenes these kinds of meetings every time. We know that people are interested and willing to work together. But of course, that's not for me to do. I'm just here as an advisor, as it were. So someone in the administration, I suppose, would have to, you know, initiate these kind of institutionalization processes.
Yeah. And Shamsu, back to the question I kind of teed up for you, which is, you know, I mean, we can't keep doing things the same old way and expect anything different.
Yeah.
We can't solve poverty in Nigeria if we don't have data. We can't have 5-year-old data and use it in making policy 5 years later. We can't have cumulative, you know, just macro level data and use it to understand what's happening in my village in Ojoto, right? So we've got to figure out how to leverage technology, how to use proxies. What are some of the things you guys are thinking of in MBS to solve this problem? Because we need you to be able to end poverty in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Yes, I agree with you. The traditional way of gathering data is capital intensive. So we must devise a means whereby, with or without surveys, we must generate poverty statistics and other statistics for the country. So we are deploying what we call crowdsourcing, even though we are at the pilot stage now.
What is called what?
Crowdsourcing.
Crowdsourcing, okay.
Yes. So we deploy it for our CPI, whereby market outlets can supply data, whether we send our enumerators to give us monthly data for the computation of the consumer price index. We're at the pilot stage now. We already developed the system whereby on a monthly basis they will open the system, key in data without like sending our enumerators to collect the data, because that costs us a lot of money. So we are thinking in that direction for the households or the selected households to supply data. And we are also in the process of deploying AI to gather data from different locations without actually implementing the traditional way of data collection. Then the small area estimation I talked about, maybe let me explain a bit better what we mean by the small area estimation. For instance, the sampling of our survey we carried out in such a way that our reporting domain will be state, that is to have national estimate and state estimates. But the small area estimation is a statistics model whereby we can factor in a lower administrative level, such as local government, so that we can come up with a reliable estimate for the local government. Even though I earlier mentioned that State Bureau of Statistics are carrying out surveys to report poverty at local government level, because their own surveys, the reporting domain is local government level. So we always include that we are working with the World Bank and UNECA, United Nations Economic Commission of Africa, and the UNICEF to develop the small area estimation, whereby we'll be churning out statistics at a very granular level.
Interesting. Professor Onya, to what extent do you use poverty data in prioritizing programs at the state level. To what extent do you, in your weekly state executive council meetings, look at poverty data to guide the decisions you're going to make in those meetings?
So, thank you so much, Patrick. I think at the beginning of the administration, one of our key policy principles was around evidence-based decision-making. So data has been a big factor for us, harnessing data, inaccessible data across the board. One of the key things, I'm glad you mentioned the Executive Council meetings, education being a big factor in trying to address poverty, across the board. We use data to even identify the locations of where we'll site our smart green schools. So the places that we understand will create the most impact for the learners within the rural areas where we have really difficult situation with addressing poverty concerns. We also, in that process, set out a data mining process, that it wasn't just the regular enrollment. We were able to get data sets from rural areas that normally were not easily accessible. So we got all the way from medical history that will address a few things around economic development to socioeconomic data on the parents, and that was collected on two levels, both at the primary healthcare levels, because each of the 260 wards had a primary healthcare and a smart green school. Something that was unprecedented. It wasn't just the learning itself; it was also the thinking behind this. So that helped us significantly. And then on the issue you mentioned earlier, we found out when we came in quickly, capacity challenge we had with the state statistics, Bureau of Statistics. And one thing that we needed to do was to quickly also improve the quality of leadership. And we quickly went into the market to headhunt and get the right type of people that will understand what it takes to even run this household survey and all the other survey that we needed to do to get in terms of our economic growth. But what was important is that we're not waiting for the 5 years. We also try to use technology to be able to get data in real time, even if the analysis is not as rigorous, but it gave us some indication,
some proxies,
yes, of the direction we needed to go. So even our social register, we now addressed, we're now using a multi-dimension survey for identifying a few things, working with the instrument the World Bank is helping us, and in that process, retraining our Bureau of Statistics to be able to harness this data.
Fantastic.
And now the feedback loop was the most important thing, not just keeping them and mining them. We needed that to come right back into policy. So that helped us significantly in the direction of our spend as it relates to poverty eradication.
No, that's good to hear. And just to say that in about 10 minutes, I'll open it up for audience participation. Please think through your questions, write them down if you must, so that we can get through a number of them. But let me come back to you, Jacob. OPHI has worked extensively on linking measurements, poverty measurements, to policy action. Yeah? What are some of the most common mistakes that governments make in trying to translate multi-poverty data to programming? What are some of the mistakes you see governments make that we should be mindful of, both at the federal and the state levels?
So the biggest, I don't want to call it mistake, but I guess a sad negligence is that very often nothing much happens. So that's the first thing, right? So you have someone like NVS or the equivalent in other countries putting out this fantastic evidence, and then because of political struggles, territorialism, not much happens with it, and these numbers just gather dust in a report somewhere on a shelf. So I think the most important thing is really to realize how valuable all of this evidence is, and we've heard how it can also be utilized, of course, at state level. But really what has worked best in most countries that I've worked with and that my colleague worked in is really seeing the government pulling together. And so I think the key thing that really has prevented progress from happening very often is that there is forces that are against or are pushing against it. So I think uniting the entire government, not only at federal level, but at state level, and bringing all stakeholders together is really important, so that not, someone says, oh, this was the previous administration, we're doing something different, or, oh, this was that and that person. Because that really has very often resulted in, as you mentioned earlier, some pilots being conducted, but then after the pilots, nothing much happening. And I think the key problem there really is that not everyone's pulling on the same string and not really behind the project. So I think bringing everyone together behind this new official statistic as not just a number, but something that really can drive action is something that's really moved the dial in the other countries we've worked with.
Fantastic. Shamsu, what are some of the things the MBS is doing to get governments, both at the federal and state level, to understand the rigor that's gone into collating some of the data, to know that they're as close as you can get to reality, and to see the value in integrating data into policy making, into programming? Are you guys thinking of more, do you have any thoughts on like a push strategy versus just allowing the governments to know that the data is there and if they want to use it, they use it?
Thank you very much. Another thing we need to understand is we are pulling our salary from the government as National Statistics Office. Even though we have level of independence in terms of releasing our data, nobody is telling us change this, change that. But we always carry out dissemination of our data at different levels. And I think Jacob mentioned some of them. When we released the MPI survey, because the report was analyzed at indicator level, to even know what's pushing Nigerians into the multidimensional poverty, is it education, nutrition, or whatever indicator, we try to engage specific sector actors to tell them that this is the analysis for health, for education, for all the indicators within the MPI. And we try to explain to them how they can interpret the data, not like we just print the report and just give it to them and as we say we disseminate. So we try to carry out sectoral engagement with different sectors to explain the indicators. And another thing we need to know concerning the MPI, I'm so specific about the MPI, we disseminated the report at state level in such a way that, because the reporting domain for MPI was senatorial districts, the one we have analysis for the 109 senatorial districts. And let's assume when we are conducting the survey, we had a lot of money, we'll have reported at the 774 local government. But still the senatorial district will give idea where the interventions are needed. So we engage the state government, different state government, to explain how to interpret the data and how to use the data to formulate their own state policies.
Nice. Professor Sonia, maybe one more question for you before we go to the audience. Many critics argue that Nigeria's poverty programs tend to focus a bit on symptoms, and not root causes. So we see a lot of palliatives, rice, whatever, wheelbarrow, things like that. What structural barriers have you kind of encountered at the state level that limit the effectiveness of some of these poverty interventions that you're trying to do at the state?
Thank you, Patrick. One big one is the political economy, the pressure. Political leaders usually put under significant pressure to be able to run the old ways of doing this, or also to push for changes that are not sustainable just to meet with their experience, political experience. That's one of the key things we found out. Another thing that also is that most of the economic outlook within the subnationals, at least with ours, is a lot of informal economic activities, not within the formal market. So to manage that, to track that is also a challenge in terms of what we're doing. And another thing is our land accessibility issues. So, it's difficult from even a gender perspective and difficult to have access to land and also access to credit So these are some of the key things that we encountered in addressing our strategy. And we're building a strategy around that. Yes.
Just one more question for you. The literature speaks a lot about the very short-term nature of the political cycle. So in Nigeria, we've got 2 terms, 4 years, and what then happens is that the government comes in 2.5 years in, they're planning for the next elections. Some of the real things you need to do to solve poverty at the root cause level take years to manifest. And if you're trying to do those long-term things, you may not have visible results to show to win the next election. I'm sure that you guys are dealing with these same types of issues. How are you balancing it in the conversations, both at the technical level, at the political level? How are you balancing all those pressures to ensure that you're planting trees that will provide shade for eternity? Not eternity, but for a very long time, rather than just planting maize that will do something today, but tomorrow is not there. Yeah?
What we tried to do at the very beginning was to separate our approach to political tenured risk and also long-term infrastructure, long-term economic development interventions. What we did was also within the governance model to separate the office of the Secretary to the State Government at the very beginning to focus strictly on delivery and not the politics, so to speak. And what this helped us was to identify clearly what the key pillars of institutional transformation could look like, the timelines, what the political economy risks were, and we started very early. If there were policies, if there were legislation, anything that was going to make it irreversible. A perfect example would be the education intervention, the smart green schools. The results are not going to be evident in the next 10 to 15 years. That's when we had planned that our students that were able to take classes around mechatronics, artificial intelligence, augmented reality in our K9 model, basic, was going to now, they were going to transform, if they were going to a technical school, continue with that hands-on or move into a higher education. These things are not things that commissioning the smart school in itself was just a milestone in the long-term education transformation. These are not things that you do when you're planning to just go run an election in 4 years.
So how is he planning to win his election?
So we also worked on the infrastructure. We're doing roads, because it's not just a one-focused approach. So you have to address it with multi-strategy when you understand what the risks are. So we're doing roads, we're doing infrastructure, that we're doing primary healthcare, we're improving health issues, we're giving accessibility on mass transit buses, CNG buses. We're also working towards our climate action plan, planting trees, things that are long lead time, yet provide some support for us to show people that we're actually doing the real work. So,
are you doing any palliatives?
So the federal government, yes. So we are working with them, and that's why we're cleaning up our social register to make sure that names of those that are in there are actually reflective of those that are challenged economically.
Fantastic.
So we're doing all that.
I have to go to the audience, but I'm hoping somebody in the audience will ask you how you're cleaning up the social register.
Yes,
yeah?
and I will answer.
Microphones, hands. Okay, I see the guy in front here. There's a microphone behind you. I hear another microphone. Yeah? Yeah, let's take that one. What? Are you set? Okay.
Morning, everyone. My name is Samuel. I want to thank Nest for organizing this.
Yeah, let's get, yeah.
My question goes to the Secretary of the State Government. Me, I studied planning, so I'm very much interested in poverty alleviation and improving the lives of the people. So, one thing about development is, we don't just, this what measures did you use to come up with the need to create smart and green city? Because most of the times what people need most time is not what we provide for them. So what are the measures that you consider before coming up with this?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
My question is also for Professor Chidere. My name is Shukri Major. While you were speaking, you mentioned that every ward in the state now has a smart green school and a healthcare facility. You also mentioned so many wonderful projects. My question is there any documented strategy on how this was quickly and effectively implemented so that we can see this can be replicated in other states in Nigeria? And my second question is just following one of the last questions that you asked by the moderator. Is there any legal system or strategy to ensure the sustainability of these great innovations we put in place? Because like you said, power will change hands, and power is power. How do we ensure that these smart schools don't get shut down by the time there's a change in government? How do we ensure that the wonderful things you put in place continue? Because one thing we have change in government.
Sure.
Projects get shut down.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. There's a hand behind. Just because your baby is like my own.
My name is Emmanuel. I wish the Statistician General of the Federation was here. I wanted to ask, this multi-dimensional poverty data, we're told is 5 years old. And there's no funding, like from your presentation, Mr. Samsudin, to do another one. Is it part of the political pushback? And how do you navigate political pushback by the political operators when this result comes, both at the federal and the sub-national level? Thank you.
Behind him.
My name is Henry Chubu. I work with Innovation Poverty Action, a global research and policy organization. Thank you so much for this quite insightful panel.
The lady back there.
Thank you, Shona. And my question will go to everyone who has spoken. I want to understand just the dimensions you take in the space of the work you do. I also want to understand how you take into cognizance the non-state actors. You have, silo works, silo action plans, silo implementations by CBOs, NGOs, and then you have the government on the other side doing the big project. But how do you consolidate all of that, even in terms of data gathering and in terms of us not repeating what every other person has done? How do you consolidate non-state actors' performance and how do you integrate Jesse?
Fantastic. There's a gentleman in front here.
Good morning. Like the second to the last speaker said,
So the question will still be coming to you. Then in extension to the panel, a little bit, what I'm going to ask will not be directly explained. There's a nexus between development and security, and we're talking about ending poverty and all that associated with it. A lot has been going on and being said about this bit of insecurity in English states. So I want to make a special issue of farmer health issue, as thrown up here and there. Is there any specific effort or program that the government have to tackle this issue about insecurity? Because without it, we can't have any sustainable development.
Fantastic. Thank you. Engineer Bindri.
Thank you very much. Just as an advice to Professor Chidi, I am an academic graduate.
I'm former SSG as well.
Also secretary to the government. I advise that we speak if you have time. And I also advise you to speak in Professor Yade, the former governor of Cross River State. The overview of all of us, what you have done, but you need some advice. Thank you.
Okay, the lady in red. Maybe 2 more questions and then we'll come back this way. He was.
Thank you very much. My name is Ugomana Dude, and my question is to Engineer Lawal. I want to ask about the funding issue that you talked about. So like Mr. Patrick said, it's not going anywhere. So what's the MDS doing about it? Because at the end of the day, we need this data. And some of the responses that you gave to the question about how you're leveraging technology was not really clear. So I would like you to share more light on that. Thank you.
Maybe one last question. The lady? Okay, we'll come to you. You're the last now. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
I have 2 questions. The first one is from the legal framework perspective. How has the Enugu State government incorporated a participatory, justiciable, and irreversible poverty eradication program? This question is for the Prof. And the second one is for Mr. Sham Shidin. What is the cost of conducting another MPI in Nigeria and the time frame of another one?
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Olufemi Faith, and my question is to Mr. Shamsuddin. You mentioned that there's a new initiative to gather data at the ground level. The thing is, everyone is always excited at the start of a new project, but have you considered some things that failed in your previous projects to know what to do and what to avoid to prevent this one from failing? Because you don't just want small wins, you want something that will last. Have you considered how to monitor this initiative closely and to follow up correctly to ensure a lifelong success?
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. A number of questions. I would say about 60% of them to Professor Onya. So the first one was, what measures did you use in coming up with the smart schools? And I think you can combine that with how to document and ensure that we can replicate some of these successes and how sustainable.
Thank you so much. When all the hands went up, I was saying to Patrick, I hope all these people are not going to ask me questions.
You jinxed it.
And once they asked questions, initially when I was speaking, my legs were crossed. You can see I'm sitting down properly now. Thank you, Adamawa, former SSG, yes, I look forward to the conversation on advice. To the first gentleman, thank you. Initially when we started the thinking, His Excellency, Dr. Peter Ndubuisimba, had multiple stakeholder engagements within the LGs and the wards. What we've done, or what we know in the past, is that most of the decisions are made from the ward level. And it's also challenging because the people that sit in those halls are usually elitists, so to speak, in the political space. So we try to use multiple collection points, some of the people that were in his data team, because there's always been a framework that allows data to drive most of the decisions. And knowledge, it wasn't just school, it was knowledge, a type of knowledge we wanted our students, our children to have, and how that can translate the economic outlook of these parents. And when the explanation was presented in that way, that is not just going to pass exams, it was just to change the economic activity, and each of the smart schools were not stand alone. Around each of the smart green schools were other economic activities that can increase the livelihood, the water access, the renewable energy. So most of them bought into this as an intervention that will help them see a future that changes their current situation. That hence the mantra in Enugu State, tomorrow is here. So it's beginning to think about what you can do tomorrow, but start it now. So we engaged those stakeholders extensively. And to the second question, yes, every single activity is documented. So what we did also was to ensure that the strategy was not just in the infrastructure. We also looked at the pedagogy. What type of curriculum were we going to design to be able to address what we saw as a big gap that we have now in an exam-focused curriculum to one that was now focused on inquiry-based, hands-on, how you can learn and engage your mind and your hands in able to deliver things. So that required a strategy first. We had to do an extensive literature review where this has been done, models, societies that have done this, and what were the risks they ran into. So we set all that teacher quality. We built in the teacher quality by now also building along this a center for experiential learning that can transition the current teacher workforce into a learning mode that can now translate this type of learning methodology. We also understood that technology was going to be a key enabler for learning in these smart green schools. Now they are going to all have smart boards. The kids are going to have tablets from 4th grade that can help them do their assignments. They were all going to be offline. We're also connecting the schools to a data system where they could now actually conduct research at a very young age. We have augmented reality where they could now start thinking of producing things. All these things were documented. And we now decided also, if we were going to maintain the 33%, Enugu State, by the way, has the highest education allocation in any state. 33% of our budget is allocated to education. Now, the challenge is what happens when we leave. So now, some of the stakeholders, we had a Enugu State's model is being adopted now across the board. Nigerian Governors Forum, they've come to understudy us, the United Nations, UNICEF, they've also been there when they did their World Congress in Enugu State. And one of the key things we did was to have a stakeholder engagement of civil society organizations, students across the board to find out what do they think can help sustain this process so that it's not reversed by the next administration. So they asked for things like legislation that we had to go in. So we are in the process now of developing that to make sure that a law is passed that supports what we're doing now so we don't invest. Over each smart school is close to $1 billion. And you know Enugu State is not an oil-producing state, but you put your money where your mouth is, something that you think is important in terms of prioritization. So we're doing the infrastructure, we're doing the equipping, we're also doing the continuous teacher development, and we're going to assess the quality from what students are able to do beyond just WAEC, beyond just NACO, and all that. Sure. So that's on one side what we're doing to make sure it's irreversible. And I'll go to the next question, sorry. Let me see.
I think you answered part of it. You said evidence-based decision-making.
Yes. So
the state managing interest of stakeholders.
Yes. So this is very important. The political stakeholders, the political elites, managing that. So what we've done is that for every step, the governor is very, very focused on town hall meetings, engaging everybody, the political stakeholders, and the elites to be able to share everything we're doing and also solicit feedback from them. If the feedback is something that helps us, even our road networks, where we put our rural roads, where we put our access, especially around our agriculture corridor, and for our special agro-processing zones, our collaboration with the African Development Bank, where they're located to create that whole value chain intervention. Our focus on converting the current cargo terminal in Enugu now into our Enugu state-owned through a private partnership or a special purpose vehicle to own that particular facility, working with with FAN, the Federal Ministry of Aviation. All those things are things that we share with the political stakeholders as much as we also know that the technical expertise and the technical group sits on the back of it. But one thing that is very important is that we built a strong analytics team that sits behind my office. So we have a group of young people. We believe strongly in making sure that we empower young people that sit on the back of even our project management system is all evidence-based. We track the numbers based on milestones. We allocate weightings to milestones. We crunch the numbers. We raise the numbers back to His Excellency. Every Saturday, he gets an evidence one-pager report on the status of where we are, and that also informs part of the decision we make at ESCO. ESCO is not an approval process where we come in and we talk about memos and everybody leaves. We actually interrogate the data, we interrogate the trajectory, and we're also open to change our strategy. As new information comes in, we adapt, we change. But evidence is the only thing that can do that, not perception. So we integrate that in our system, and it's a learning process. We're building a lot of lessons into it. We're not where we ought to be, but this is something that has become a culture in Enugu State leadership. So the next one is the Jesse aspect of it. For us, even in our poverty eradication, we identified very early on that women have challenges with accessing credit and also with accessing land. So our farm estates in each ward is something that allows those people that it's now mechanized at no cost to the rural women that are into farming. They can access these facilities at no cost to them. So it's not just the palliative of giving them, the inputs also are given to them free to increase their economic outlook. Our development entities also focus strictly on women, not as tokenistic, but things that we know from research, from the work we've done. Once they are given equal access, their economic growth is always faster. So we focus on this, and through our SDG office, we are crunching these numbers to make sure that we are not missing anything, that we need to do in terms of intervention. So Jess is a big thing for His Excellency.
Maybe one last question
Yes.
that we got on security.
Yes, Nexus.
Yeah.
Okay,
So that I can get to...
Well, Patrick, they asked me all these questions, so I have to answer, right? So you have to give me extra time. And that last question on security is very important. So if most of you recall, on the very first day in office, one thing that the governor did, Dr. Peter Ndubisimba, those of you that are aware of the security challenges in the Southeast, was the Monday sit-at-home experience. That was our first test of how we're going to engage the issue of security. Because if we're going to be the top 3 locations for investment in the country, one key thing is that you can hedge almost every risk. But what private investors can never do is to hedge the risk of security. That was our obligation and the thing we needed to do. So we started on that. We also went ahead and introduced technology across the length and breadth of Enugu State. We installed smart cameras across the board, AI-enabled smart cameras that could do facial recognition, do the crunching of numbers. Everybody, most of you heard what the NBA testimonials were when they came for Enugu for the conference, across the length and breadth. But we also have hotspots, and those hotspots are the areas that we know that we are patrolling with technology, with also our DRS, our distress response squad that we also integrated in this administration to deal with issues. They're not just header farmer issues alone, but across the board, kidnap and all that. And I can tell you something, the data we have compared to the data we started with shows a significant reduction. Now, are we at a place where we will say is zero crime? I'm not sure if there's anywhere in the world where there's zero crime. But what we are doing is to make sure that if you come and commit crime in Enugu State, you will know that we will catch you. It's just a matter of time. And on the header issue, we also noticed that we have engaged all the stakeholders that are involved, and we've also gone out of the states to engage real leaders, Meitala leaders, some of the northern leaders, and most of them incidentally have ancestry or relationship in Enugu State. So they've worked very closely with us to reduce that issue across Ozowane. Eziago axis where you will normally have these incidents. These incidents happen once in a while now. It's not like it was before where it's a daily occurrence. But are we where we need to be? It's a process, and we'll continue to work it on it. Data, technology helps us do a lot of the intelligence gathering.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. Shamsu, you got some of the questions as well.
Yes, I think I have all the questions.
Lack of funding, is it a political pushback?
Yes, I think that's the first question concerning the interval or the periodicity of the survey. The MPI is just 3 years old, not 5 years old, I think, as mentioned by the person that asked the question. And there's rationale why poverty needs to be measured in a very long period of time, not like a monthly or quarterly, just like how we measure CPI, GDP, or unemployment. Because poverty is not something that changes every month or every year. So you have to give it a time. When there are policies, I think the representative of the vice president mentioned it, the policies by the government, yes, it's a very hard one. So if we have policies like this, we can even go to the field and measure the major poverty, so that we know whether the impact of those policies. So it's just 3 years old, and we are planning to carry out another one. And I need to mention this, MBS is one of the lowest MDS in Nigeria, with less government funding. The international organizations are really helping us to collect this data. So I want to correct one impression. It's not like we don't have funding at all. The funding is not enough. So it's not like we don't have funding at all, so that someone will say that MBS said they don't have funding. The funding is very limited. Yes, so we need to understand that. So the MPI is still useful, and I think that's why it's being referenced in every meeting. 133 million Nigerians are multidimensionally poor. So the number is still valid. We are planning another one. It's still not yet up to 5 years. Then I think concerning still on the funding, that the answer I gave on new ways, if there's no funding. And I think I corrected this. It's not like there's no funding, but there's limited funding. Then let me reiterate that the new ways or the innovative ways we are using in gathering data, I mentioned the crowdsourcing, where we are piloting it for the data collection for the prices. We already identified some market outlets that, with or without sending our enumerators to collect data for monthly prices, those outlets will supply the data. And when we say our data gathering is capital intensive, we need to understand the cost of enumerators, buying some of the procurement, that is the capital intensive. So once we remove it from the process, and these market outlets are giving us data, or these households are giving us data, the capital intensive nature of the process will reduce. Then let me maybe expatiate that we are using satellite imagery because it's all about getting proxy. When you don't have data at all, it's better to have something, right? We are using satellite imagery in such a way that poverty is all about standard of living of people. So when you use satellite imagery, you can still come up with estimate. Checking the roof, the type of building households are using, you can still come up with estimates to know how people are really living as far as the country is concerned. Then another means we are using to collect data, even if we don't have much funding, is deployment of fund surveys at a very small sample size so that we can come up with estimates, even if it's not at state level, maybe at national or geopolitical zone. So if anybody wants to visit our headquarters, we have a call center whereby if we don't have enough resources to send people to the field to collect the data, we deploy the fund surveys. And even during the COVID, we gathered data for different international partners and even for the Nigerian government using the phone service, whereby we call households to find out whether they receive palliative or how are they surviving during the COVID.
Yep.
So then I think the next question is the cost of conducting MPA survey. We spent a lot of money, I don't have it up yet, almost 3 to 5 billion naira that time. But now if we want to carry out the survey again, we have to consider inflation. It can be times 2 or times 3 of amount spent 2022. Then I think someone asked a question about deploying new ways of collecting data, whether it will land crash. So that's why we call it pilot. So when we deploy the pilot and we see challenges, we'll come back to the house, put our house in order, improve where we need to improve before the scale up. I think that's what I capture as far as the question is concerned.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Please, a round of applause for the panel. And my apologies that we've gone over by about 10 minutes, but we'll find a way to rectify it. So thank you so much for being an attentive audience. Emeka.
All right, Patrick. One second. Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. As we move into the workshop